Welcome back to the Dave's Diary Update, the workshop series, or whatever you want to title it. A quick walk out here because it is raining. Yeah, of course it's raining because it's summer. Anyway, we're out into the workshop again. I'm progressing along happily, fortunately, and I've drilled some more holes in this panel, which is the panel that will be used when I want to cut a full width melamine sheet, the 1.2 metre or the 4 foot wide sheet. That would be big enough for it. This panel here, I just wanted to show and there's no rocket science involved here, I just wanted to show the setup so that, well, I just wanted to show it, okay? Now, don't pressure me, but I clamped on one of these rails and marked and then drilled these holes. They are my setup row of holes. Of course, I'm going to be more than likely be using the end ones, depending on how many holes are required to get the 3, 4, 5 or the 6, 8, 10, this one, or the 9, 12, 15. So we're using the middle set of setup strips or guides, and in this case it's showing how I can align this with the registration pins off of the material. It's obvious, there's no, again, I suggested there was no rocket science here, and we would have done this endlessly, when we were at school and then on the work site for those that do this sort of work, like I do. And it's the flexibility I was just wanting to show here. It could even be that the rails come right off and the setup is, for the 3-4-5ing squaring method, completely off the board, but they only need one of these guides to be swapped out for. That's a 4mm guide, this is an 8mm guide. 8mm guide is the ones that are set up for our registration pins because they're 8mm, and just registering them in one hole, or would be fine. Whatever, not in that case because they haven't been drilled yet. But along this way, one of the things was, a question could well be, why don't I use the 3 pieces of steel guides to make a perfect registration with the 3 steel pieces? And the answer is, I could. However, there had to be a however. With this setup, and because they're so thick, 10mm, they have to be supported, like this one here is sitting on top of this, so at this end it has to be supported by an equal thickness piece here, and probably wouldn't be a bad idea for the middle either, but at this length, honestly, there's not a lot of flex. There is effectively no wriggle in this setup as it is, which is really good. If you go to replicate this, the one thing that you're going to have to be mindful of is making sure you can, before you even get to the 3-4-5ing application, acquire pins or some such that can go in a guide. If you're using a guide like this, that don't chatter, got no wriggle room. Otherwise you will never be quite certain, if you get an error, where it came from. Well, I suggest it's probably, if there was a wee bit of chatter, it's more than likely going to be in the alignment, and yeah, at this point, I suggest. So, close enough for most purposes would be, honestly, okay, I'll backtrack again, as I often do. If you don't have the demand like I have, and I'm not making myself out to have any special requirements here, other than these have to be really accurate for the pins to align, because of that double layer being created separately. I reiterate again and again and again, if there were 2 layers of melamine and the holes were being drilled right through both layers at the same time, zero problem. And a lot more latitude could be allowed within your setup bars, to the point where in the last video I think I mentioned that there is no reason, going back to that idea, if you're drilling both layers at the same time, if you've got a thick top, to make it out of melamine or plywood or something right at the get-go, because you won't have this sort of, I'm not going to call it a pain in the butt, but this pain in the butt where if you get it wrong, it just won't work. That's why I am banging on endlessly about the, let's just say, aim for perfection, but you have to think about having some sort of tolerance in the design. I didn't. I almost tripped myself up, but luckily, and I'm going to put it down to luck, and I grab it when it comes my way, luck that is, the pins that I've got, these dowels here, I had 2 very similar but not exactly the same pins, and they're only 1/10 of a millimeter, 100 microns difference, and it was that little bit of difference that permitted me to utilize a tolerance that made it all work. If I had to use these pins here, there would have been virtually zero tolerance, and that's not a good thing for this sort of work. I'm not a fine, engineer. I'm not an engineer anyway. I'm a builder. But I think if I'm getting down to those tolerances to make this work, you've got to be cognizant of that if you go to replicate this, that you too should work towards that sort of that degree of refinement. Otherwise, whack into it. In fact, I might even do that at some stage. I might mark. In fact, that's interesting. I've got that bar. That was my prototype. It wasn't meant to be a prototype, but it turned out to be. That one there is... No, I won't want to use that. I actually did mark it out very, very accurately, and because of the nature of me and the steel, I got it ever so slightly out. But it would be interesting to put a couple of bushes in that, bushings like this, and see how well they align or not. This being suggested, a wee bit more accurate than that. So, yeah. Anyway, just thought I'd show the orientation of and implementation of the bars. I will mark these holes now, and then I'll replicate this in mirror so that that bar can come across here and that diagonal can go across here, logically. And then I'll mark those holes, and then I can use the bar to register, and just like these series of holes, I can mark them all the way through and only drill some of them, because I can only get to the first 2 rows from each edge. And after that, I've got to come up with a different method, which I've already got. And that's one of the limiting factors of using this sort of thing, if strips, on the drill press. You are limited to the number of rows you can go, if they're spaced at 100mm or 96mm, but you're limited to the number of rows, which I'm going to say on most drill presses will be 2 rows, by the dimension of from the drill bit itself to the post of the drill. The bigger your drill you've got, the more rows you've got that you're capable of drilling. So that's a small one, that's a medium, it's a kind of like a, yeah, that's a medium one. It's not a bench mounted one, even though it could in some ways be considered that, but it's not a pillar one. That size doesn't make any difference. It's the, yeah, we'll keep it seemly, but it's the width, the distance between the drill centre to the post. So in this case, 167.5. I kind of measured it. So the maximum I can go for 100mm space ones with a 50mm initial offset is 2 rows, this one being 150mm in. There you go. But with the change of and use of these for drilling, which will be one of the next things I do, and it is more simple than I initially thought, but we still have to register the bar in a side hole, pack this bar up, or that bar, pack it up 20mm. It's 10mm at the moment. Maybe I just need to pack it up with a wee bit of custom wood, 25mm or 18 for this, but pack it up, insert a guide into the appropriate hole. No, I'm going to actually back that. No, that actually, would that work? I hadn't thought about that. Ooh, it might work. The reason I hesitated there is because originally all I was going to do is to use the bar, float it around with the drill tip, in the bushing, etc., until the tip of it hits my mark on the board, and then clamp it off on the ends. But if I actually set it up with registration pins, will these be able to be used to actually create the holes? Wonder how accurate that would be. Anyway, that's for me to figure out and then let you know. Okay, that's it. It's a relatively quick one. That's the setup. Very straightforward. This is slightly bigger than the 300 or 400 wide. It's 7 something by 700, whatever. And yeah, there you go. Rightio, I'll leave you with that, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye now.